When everything becomes cheap enough to win, in reality, no one wins. For many years, China's rise looked unstoppable. The world had practically turned into its factory. They had built such an efficient production machine that it almost looked like an art form. Cities that never slept, factories whose lights never turned off at night, prices that kept falling year after year. Western companies eventually stopped even trying to compete. This was the miracle of scale, discipline, and long-term planning, a civilization turning human labor into economic power. But every miracle has a cost, and China's greatest strength, its ability to produce everything cheaper, faster, and bigger, slowly started to become its greatest weakness. This is the financial historian, where money, power, and history intersect, and nothing is ever as simple as it looks from the outside. China's story is really the story of modern capitalism pushed to its limits. A system that rewards growth at all costs, even if those costs destroy the future of the system itself. So what happens when the world's largest manufacturing economy optimizes itself until exhaustion? What happens when efficiency starts to destroy itself? To understand that, we need to go back to 1978. That year, Deng Xiaoping stood in front of the Communist Party and broke one of socialism's biggest taboos. He told the Chinese people something very simple. Getting rich is not shameful. Getting rich is patriotic. That sentence was one of the most important sentences in modern economic history. Because after that moment, China completely changed. Overnight, peasants became entrepreneurs. Farming regions turned into factories. First came Japanese investors, then Americans, then Europeans. They all saw the same thing: cheap labor, unlimited manpower, and a government ready to do whatever it takes to attract investment. China created special economic zones, cities where the rules were different, less bureaucracy, no ideological restrictions. Only one goal: attract capital and create exports. And the system worked even better than expected. A small fishing town called Shenzhen turned into a massive industrial metropolis within a few decades. Every city that saw this wanted the same success. Every province wanted its own industrial boom. Every city wanted to become the next Shenzhen. Local governments borrowed money to build highways, ports, power plants, and industrial zones to attract more factories. By the early 2000s, China wasn't just growing, it was consuming the world's demand for raw materials: steel, coal, copper, oil. If something could be produced, it was being produced in China. But underneath this growth there was a dangerous system. Success meant being cheaper than everyone else. Local governments lowered land prices, lowered taxes, and kept wages low to attract factories. Companies cut profit margins, cut costs, and sometimes even cut quality just to stay competitive. Everyone was chasing growth, but no one was chasing sustainability. This was actually a race to the bottom disguised as progress. For a long time, this wasn't a problem, because the system was extremely powerful. Millions of people moved from rural areas to cities to work in factories. They were willing to work 12 hours a day because they were still earning more than they could in the countryside. Factories never stopped. Ports never stayed empty. The Western world got cheap products, cheap clothes, cheap electronics, cheap furniture. People were able to buy more without feeling inflation. It was an illusion of abundance, and China got rich. But at some point, the system started to overheat. The economic miracle turned into an addiction. Local governments needed growth to pay back the debts they had taken. To grow, they built more factories. More factories meant more production. More production meant falling prices. By 2015, China's steel production capacity was larger than the rest of the world combined. Factories were producing faster than global demand could absorb. Prices started to fall. But not because technology improved, because everyone was producing too much of the same thing. The most interesting part was this. Companies did not reduce production when they stopped making profits. They actually produced more, because they believed selling more would cover their losses, but it didn't work. And that's when a new concept appeared, involution. This concept was originally used to describe people working harder and earning less, but now it started to describe companies and entire industries. Companies were no longer competing through innovation. They were competing by lowering prices just to survive. Solar panels, electric cars, batteries. China's new technology sectors entered a price war. Dozens of companies produced the same products and kept cutting prices. Profit margins disappeared, but no one could stop producing, because in this system production meant power. Stopping production meant losing, so a cycle formed. Prices fell, profits fell, wages stagnated, demand weakened. Companies produced even more and lowered prices again. This was a self-feeding economic loop. What China is experiencing today is not a simple crisis. It is a crisis created by extreme efficiency. China's problem is not inefficiency. It is the opposite. It is too efficient. It can fill the world with products, but it cannot make enough money from those products. The world gets cheap goods, but China's own economy becomes weaker. This is not the first time in history this has happened. Britain experienced something similar after the Industrial Revolution. Japan experienced something similar after the 1980s. Even the Roman Empire lost its economic balance due to overproduction. History shows us something very important. Every efficiency empire eventually faces the same question. Can you slow down growth in order to survive? China's biggest problem is this. The system was not built to slow down. It was built to keep growing forever. If growth stops, debts appear, unemployment rises, and the legitimacy of the system is questioned. That is why production is no longer an economic decision. It is a political decision. Factories are not running because they are needed. They are running because the system needs them to run. And the biggest irony of all is this. The thing that made China the most powerful manufacturing economy in the world, brutal competition and the pressure to produce cheaper and cheaper, is now the same thing that prevents anyone from making money. The thing that made the system strong is now making it weak. Because when a system optimizes everything except balance, eventually there is only one thing left to destroy: itself.